Hello, welcome back to another one of our videos, and this time we're looking at phase 3 of our knee pain workouts. The previous two phases we looked at more at mobility in the first one, preparing the body for things to come. Then we were moved to the stability stage where we start to introduce slightly harder movements but not really heavily loaded, not really about strength, just getting control of the joints. Now we're sort of in this phase where it's almost strengthening but not quite. So not really full on with load, more about trying to gain control with eccentric and isometric strength and sort of a harder version of stability. So this first exercise is the single leg deadlift, which follows on from the Romanian deadlift that we had in phase 2 with the barbell. Alright, now this is a significantly harder exercise, and it's a much more effective one too for controlling problems of the knee. It's just that sometimes it might be a bit too difficult to bring in early on, so you might have to, if you're struggling, you might have to stick with the Romanian one for a bit longer, and maybe the toe touch drill, because it kind of follows on from those. If you could imagine those two exercises joined together, that would create this. All right, so where I need the stability, and I need a significant amount of strength through the glutes to control the alignment of the legs. So you can see here how much my glutes are really loaded up in this position, but also my foot is having to work really hard so it doesn't roll over or overcorrect and fall out the other side. Everything's about trying to keep control of the knee so I can really sit into the hips. So the glutes doing the main thing of keeping that femur in the right angle, and the right alignment I should say, and that's why this exercise will probably be used all the way through the entire program. It's arguably the most effective at all of the ones that I would use, but also it can be the most problematic at times because the person can't control it. So if you don't have a good understanding of the hip hinge, you'll never be able to get it. If you don't have good balance in single leg stance, you'll never be able to get it. So you might have to use some of the exercises from phase 2 for a bit longer. It all depends on the person. Now, like previous videos, previous workouts, I combine this with an upper body movement where I can use something to complement what I was just doing, but not exhaust or compromise what I was trying to achieve with that first exercise. So the last time we had the cable press, which was this version. This time though, I would, if I could, I might try to introduce the weight shift version where I'm using the legs to actually move now. So it's where I'm still got the load working horizontally, so I'm not compressing on the joint, but I do have to control this lateral movement. So when I'm sitting back into it, like right there, you can see how I have to control this nice foot alignment and hip alignment, and from side on, which you can't see here, and you'll see it on the next go, how far I have to sit back. So I'm not upright hitting the knee, I'm making my hip generate the power to move. All right. So this is a great way to start to introduce knee-loaded movements without it being excessively heavy and compromising. So you can see here how really sitting into my glutes. So as I come back around, I sit back out into it. You see my glutes loaded up big time. And even that calf, you can see how much the calf contraction there, this toeing off thing. This is also an important part, one factor that a lot of people have trouble with knee pain. They don't really have good control through that area as well. So this starts to bring it in without it being overly difficult and tiring. Alright, so it's a great exercise that complements the single leg deadlift. So that'd be my first two that I begin with. Okay, so this next exercise is the decline squat, which is kind of hard to see the ramp because it's almost camouflaged into the rubber mats here, but this is the first time I'm really loading the knee joint itself. So everything we've seen so far has been about the hips. This time we're actually specifically loading the knees in a squat movement, but not really moving, just trying to get control and use an isometric contraction by staying in the squat for anywhere between 3 and 8 seconds. Sometimes 8 seconds is too long, so I might start with just 3 seconds and build up. But ideally I want to get that nice alignment that you can see here. So I'll pause this, I'm not holding it all this time, but I'm trying to get that nice alignment. There's obviously a significant amount of contractions through the quads, but more so the tendons themselves. the isometric contractions building a lot of strength into the tendon specifically, so it doesn't break again and tear. All right, so this is a great way to bring in some knee-loaded movements without it, where you have a lot more control. And again, I'm not really trying to build quadricep strength, I'm trying to build tendon strength. So in preparation for the much more difficult things to come. Again, it's hard to know if it's too early. Sometimes it is. I may have to use some of the other exercises from the previous phases a little bit longer. Maybe some of the ones in the program to come might be a better choice. But then again, sometimes this is the best one, and it works really well straight away. It just all depends on the person. What I'll use in between it is where I start to use some reactive neuromuscular training exercises. So it's where I can start to pick on either the glute with its stability and firing in certain positions, or the foot. All right. So again, no weight on this, just body weight. So I can bring in like a kind of a lunge type movement, almost like a walking phase. I'm really sort of testing the hip. So I've got the band just above the knee, with the object of the band trying to actually make me do it wrong, and me, like in a walking or running phase, trying to control basically you can see probably too much resistance. So the band's trying to pull my knee this way so that I'd end up in alignment like that, which would be horrible for the knee. Usually that's what's already happening. So more or less it's actually trying to feed the problem. So like we saw in the crab walks, whenever I've got my glute pulling, trying to pull out this way, but it's just resisting the band, but I get this beautiful alignment. So the glute has to stay engaged. The foot can't try to help, because if it does, I'll lose my balance. So my foot has to stay permanently neutral and flat, so I can complete the movement effectively. All right. So if I'm suspecting that the hip's the problem, I might do this version. If I'm suspicious that the foot is the problem, I'm going to make the band lower, and I'm going to put have it pulling on the other side. So if I was to do the same leg again, I'd actually be facing the other way. But for the video, just so you get an idea, so let's say I'm suspicious that it's the left foot that's causing all the trouble. Now I've got the band pulling outward, which again, if the band was successful, it would actually put me in that position of that again, because basically it would pull my tibia upward and out. All right, which then would make my femur roll inward. All right, so by doing this, I'm actually forcing my foot to stay permanently controlling the movement, so it can't actually leave the ground. All right, so it just depends on the person which one I might use. Sometimes it's more problems with the hip, sometimes it's more problem with the feet. So I might just use this in combination with that ramp squat. So again, I'm not really heavily loaded here, it's just more of a stability exercise. So it's a great one that complements the single leg deadlift from the first exercise. All right, so let's have a look at the next two. Okay, so this next one is a progression of the cable pull. Now, I've got the cable deliberately positioned quite high. All right, now if I have a fair bit of weight on this, it's obviously going to hurt my arm, but actually going to help my legs, because I can eccentrically lower into this really slowly. So you can see I'm really slowly moving down, and because of the weight of the cable machine, if it's heavy enough, it actually unloads my legs, because it would just pull me up. I don't actually need the strength to push up that much, because the weight is actually going to just pull me up anyway. All right, which is really handy if I know I've got trouble with the legs and I'm trying to gain control of positions and build some small amount of strength. So if I lower really slowly while the muscles are lengthening, they're building some strength, an incredible amount of strength. But more importantly, they're gaining the control of the movement and not like loading themselves into unnatural or poorly aligned positions that ruin me. The longer this goes, the glutes really become a huge part of this once again. Obviously the arm is a big part of it as well, but even better than that, the posterior sling really gets heavily activated in this. But the best part is just learning to get these knee-loaded movements pain-free, like getting control of them, because it's weird, if I had no weight on this, it's so much harder. It's actually the one time the load actually makes things easier. All right, so this is where I can really help that person start to get some strength back with that lunge, and the eccentric loading of the tendons again, like the isometric thing with the ramp squat, really makes a huge difference. All right, now exercise that might complement this, I can use, there's many ways I might go, but I'm probably starting to think, okay, how can I start to, I've been mainly focusing on some slow things. How can I bring in some little bit quicker things, but not too quick, and not really knee loaded, still hip loaded. So I'm just messing with the tempos. This is another variation of the deadlift again, so where I'm basically hip hinging, but I'm not really one leg this time. And I've got this cable with the resistance pulling forward, so that when I step back, my glute has to really so I'm loading my glute there like I did with the single leg deadlift, but when I step back, the hip extension of me pulling the cable really activates the lower part of the glutes. So that when I'm stepping here, it's very much the top part, and then it's more the lower part. They're all working, but the different angles and positions favour one side more than the other. All right, so that's one way I could maybe, one exercise I might use from time to time. I could actually put the cable a little bit lower, so as I've done here, and that sort of challenges more of the stability again. Makes me learn to control the stance when I step forward, because the rubber band just wants to really rip my leg. All right, and then the hinging action, I'm really learning to gain momentum. So the two dumbbells are not for bicep curls. They're there to create like a pendulum effect through the hips to really rip it through quickly, which becomes even more important when we get to the later programs. All right, so this is very much preparing you for harder things to come. All right, so that might be one way I might go. Sometimes I might do the walking deadlift, which is very much similar to what I just did, just I'm actually moving forward. All right, and I actually get a bit of rotation on this. So you'll see here I kind of move a little bit of rotation on this. This is quite a unique movement. A lot of people struggle with coordination on this as well. Again, it's not knee loaded, it's very much hip loaded. So a great exercise for just getting that more dynamic control. You can kind of see there when I really load up into it, right at that point there, how the knee just slightly rolls out, and that's being dictated by the hip and that rotation part of it. And you'll see, I'll do it a couple from a side on. There it is there again. So great way to build the VMO and the glutes. From side on, you'll see how much I'm really loading the hip, and it's identical to the last one. And you'll see right here when I rotate how much I get out of it. On the next one with the right leg, the rotations really adds that extra bit where the femur sits even further back, which is what I don't get on the previous ones. Up until now, I haven't had any rotation added. This is the first time that I do that, so that this can be a real handy way to build something into the restoring the function and the strength again. All right, so let's have a look at the last ones. Okay, so the last couple of exercises are basically really simple ones. So this is the cable wood chop, which I've done many times before. Kind of did it before with the single cable push if I was adding the weight shift. So it's really kind of doing it again, but I'm bringing in this lateral movement. Again, the cable with the resistance high, it doesn't add too much compression, so I can make mistakes on this and get away with it, but really just learning how to position the hips in this lateral movement. I get a bit of an adductor stretch each way. Again, it's mainly about the core, and again loading that hips in the nice position, just gaining control. Even though it's mainly a core exercise, you can again see how much I really load the glutes here and pushing through laterally. So lateral movement's always a problem for the knee. This is a great one to just rebuild it and bring it, and get confidence with these movements again, slowly loading the knee without it being too strenuous. All right, so to be the wood chop I could add in. Last one I might add in is just maybe an extra. I don't always use this, but again, if I couldn't do the single leg deadlift at the beginning, let's say I had to stick with the Romanian deadlift, I could probably use this exercise as a way to strengthen the single leg stance without it being as difficult. So basically I'm just a hip extension here, using a stick to assist my balance and help me control it. So it's actually a lot harder than it looks, this. A lot of people are really surprised how difficult this is. Being up on the ball, it can move around sideways, so you do need a fair bit of control. You've got a greater range of motion than you have on the floor, so you can really push through a lot, and you will get a little bit of quad work in this as well. So the best part is you're not vertically standing, so you're not compressing the knee joint. So a lot of people who still have pain can actually do this one quite well, or I wouldn't say well, but they can do it without pain. Where if I try to do the standing one, there's still a bit of compression, so they can't do it. So again, it's another stepping stone, just like getting to where I want to be, but through a side entrance. I could also remove the stick, and it makes it a little bit more difficult. So without the stick, you really have to control the sideways movement, the lateral movement, a lot more. So I usually just put my hands out to the side. Again, this is a lot harder than it looks. Until you try it yourself, you won't realise just how difficult this can be. Yeah, and again, you're just learning to control lateral movements again, which is usually the catalyst of knee pain. The poor stabilising methods that people use. All right, so a great exercise you could use to complement everything. Now I'll just show you a couple of quick upper body things you could throw in amongst this if I had to leave a couple of these out, or I wanted to just add a few more arm things. So I'll have a quick look at those. All right, so I could add, if I wanted some extra upper body work, I could add some lat pull downs or like some chin ups like I'm doing here. It has really no relevance to the knee, but you might feel like, okay, I want to still work my upper body quite well. So you might want to do this. Great core exercise if you're able to do them, that is. Lat pull downs even easier. Works the same sort of things. Can be very useful with other exercises that use the posterior sling later on, so you've got a bit of strength in the upper body. So don't underestimate things like that. I could also do, if you wanted to do a shoulder press, it's where I could actually do a shoulder press but make it a little bit more about the legs. So again, not trying to make it hard for the legs. So all I've got to do is just stand on one leg and just do a shoulder press. It's actually a lot harder than it looks. So on this contralateral stance, so while the load is mainly about my right arm here, the stabilising of my left leg is a big part of it. And again, it's sort of preparing me for things that I might do that are almost the same as this, except just a lot harder. But this is like a foundation movement to get ready for it. All right. So if you're looking for other ways to build in, and again, I could use these like as supersets with some of the other ones. If I'm getting quite tired, I could throw that in there. It gives my legs a bit of a rest, even though they're still working. They're not like annihilated. All right. So just another way that I might at times give someone something else to do that they might enjoy a little bit more, but it's still actually really helping. They just don't realise it. All right. So anyway, that gives you some ideas of how I might do the phase 3 program. Again, there's no template. How well I might go, this might be completely different from one to the next, but just gives you an idea of how you can piece it all together.